one context of Afghanistan, if we compare this with Iran, I think we have been to Iran. I have been to Iran a couple of times and having different sort of access to different groups there, particularly women groups in Iran. And when we compare our realities, it was very evident that despite all the challenges that we were talking about, I would say, fortunately, in Afghanistan, there is much less restriction from the state when it comes to women and women's active role. Um, as I mentioned in my remarks, the fact that we are not using the title feminism is also to do with the sensitivities. I mentioned that isms are a little bit complicated when it comes to Afghanistan because of the Soviet invasion to begin with and the following situations that happened after that. So by avoiding only the title, we try to sort of bypass the whole package that comes with the identity of whether feminism is a Western phenomenon or an Eastern phenomenon and what it really means contextually. So we sort of bypass that conversation, but mainly bring our focus into actively working in the society, whether promoting women's role in the decision making, to promote women as ministers and deputy minister, or to be more active in the grassroots activism. I would have to say here that with a proud that actually in the past year or a couple of years since the discussions and conversations about the peace talks with the Taliban started, women across the country, and that includes women in remote areas and women in the cities, in the capital, they became the most active and the most vocal part of the civil society in Afghanistan, reminding the president, reminding the leadership of Afghanistan, reminding the world that they cannot be ignored in the peace with the Taliban. And this really became a game changer because at the very beginning, even unfortunately, our international supporters, but also our own government supporters, some of them, some government officials, I will not say all and everyone, but some, they all were in this mood that, you know what, let's first have peace with Taliban and then we come back to the question of the, women and whether a woman will have time, will have right or not. And thanks to the noise making, I would call it, and it was also called by some people from the sort of the pro-Taliban people that why women were making too much noise. We never say that we don't give right to women or not. I mean, we never talk about this. So why are you making so much noise? And we say, well, really, if we didn't make that noise, you are completely ignoring us. And that's, to me, that's more important, to be active on the ground and try to find your place within the context to operate and to bring a change. Whether you name it one thing or another thing, that can cause, different issues due to the different factors that are involved there. So yeah, there are differences in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of freedom of organizations and all that. That also is linked with the very last question asked: what are the limitations? Fortunately, I would say within the current political order and political system in our constitution, there is no limits. Even nowhere in our constitution it is indicated that women cannot become a president, for example. This is a clear difference with Iran, because in Iran, women cannot become a president. So there are no particular limitations. Women's active participation, women's active political participation is encouraged. Whether we are achieving our goals, unfortunately not, because we are a patriarchal society and there are barriers that are nothing to do with Taliban. Within the so-called technocratic, within the so-called democratic forces in Afghanistan, there is still very dominating mindset of patriarchy. And that requires, ages to actually struggle with and ensure a stronger and a meaningful position for women. So we are not giving up, we are not surrendering, and at the same time, we are finding our ways to operate and to be active about our rights, about our identities, and about our role, about present and future of our country. Um, the other question I think I've covered was women before the Taliban. So, like I said, before, just when we say before the Taliban, it can mean anything, going back to the seventh century, so. But then immediate before Taliban, as I said, there was a civil war going on between different groups trying to fight over power. And in this civil war period, unfortunately, women's situation was really very bad. There were cases of rapes, kidnappings, massive violations of women's rights. There were no official restriction on women's access to jobs and to justice and to services, but there were no services. It was a wartime in the cities in Afghanistan, a war that was mostly in the rural areas pre 92, moved to the cities and to the capital, the major cities in the country post 92. So between 1992 and 2000, between 1992 and 96, the country was in a complete chaos. And the Taliban came, and that's why at the very beginning some people were kind of tricked by Taliban by not resisting them, because they say, well, let's first bring peace and stability, and then think of whether women can have access to jobs or not. But